The year is 1620. Oh, oh, Priscilla, Priscilla. Ooh. I don't ever want to see a boat again for the rest of my life. Not even a canoe, not even like water, no more water ever, unless like it's to take a bath. I would give anything to take a bath. I smell like a barn. A pond, just a pond. It's really, really shallow, so my feet can be on the bottom, so we aren't going up and down and side to side and flipping over or something, it feels like sometimes. And a pond that's only about this big, so there's land all around it, and I can see the land, and I can get on the land anytime I want to and stand up. Priscilla, being an indentured servant is bad enough on land in a little cottage, but it's been 60 days on this boat, and Johnny's thrown up at least 4 times every day, and they want me to clean it up. All we have is salt water. We can't use the fresh water because we have to drink it, and we're almost running out, and it's rationing, and we might die of thirst anyway. So the storm hasn't stopped for like a week. They won't let us go up on deck, not even to get just one breath of not stench air, because we'll get swept overboard. So we're all here, 134 of us. No bathrooms. No way to clean up Johnny's every 4 hours throwing up except the salt water and my shawl, which I would say it smells really bad, but so does everything else, so I don't think it really matters. But when we first got on this boat, I thought the praying people and the singing people and the singing people and the praying people, they never stopped praying and singing. I thought that was going to drive me crazy. Throw up is so much worse. I wish they'd keep singing, but almost everybody on the boat is sick now, so everybody's throwing up and nobody's praying and singing. I wish they'd start again. They call themselves saints. Whoa. They call themselves saints, and they call us strangers. And they talk about God all the time and how God's going to help them go to the new world and have freedom. And that's nice and everything. Did you hear about the crew member, Priscilla? You know, the really obnoxious one that as soon as we got on here and they started praying and singing, he started making fun of them and cursing them and laughing at them and being as mean to them as possible. I don't really know why. I mean, okay, they're annoying with all the praying and singing and singing and praying, but not worth all of that. He actually said just 2 days ago that he hoped by the time we were done with this voyage, at least half of them had been thrown overboard in shrouds. He said he wanted them to die. Yesterday, he got sick, violently sick, and he died. And they just put him overboard in a shroud. I'm telling you what, Priscilla, the crew members around here, nobody's saying a word about those praying saints anymore. God's on their side. I'm telling you. And that's why I've decided, I hate boats. I hate boats so much. I've decided that once we get there, I really hope the Mr. and the Mrs. stick with these saints, because we're going to need God's help. I'm sure you've heard about them. The people who live on the land, nobody knows really anything about them, except they say that they're brown red skinned. I don't even know what that means. And they say they run around in the forest with no shoes on and hardly any clothes at all. If my mother was still alive, she wouldn't have let me come on this voyage, because she wouldn't let me go someplace where people are running around mostly naked. But I think that's the least of our worries, because you've heard the rumors how they get mad and then they just go and kill all the white people that they see. Well, the saints want to make friends, and they say we can make peace with them. But then there's the other ones who are like, no, we've got to have guns and we've got to protect ourselves. But then the saints say that if they start violence, then the people have reason to be violent back. And what I'm wondering is, if they start violence and the people have reason to have violence back, we all look the same, right, to them? And so are we all going to get killed just because of that guy over there? I don't know. What I know right now is that Johnny just threw up again. That's the 12th time today. I've counted. If he throws up one more time, I'm going to stuff this shop. I'm coming, Johnny. Did you eat those cockroaches again? I hate boats. I hate boats. Okay. So as you can tell, we are on the Mayflower, and we are on our way to the New World. And who are the saints and sinners, and what is all that about? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to get on the Mayflower, sort of, at least in our heads. So everybody who's here, including moms and siblings, if you are willing, you should have a name. This is your person for today. You're going to find out what happens to them, good or bad. And we are heading to the Mayflower, which is going to be over there. The first thing we're going to do is measure the width across. So Naomi, you're going to help me with that. Let's see, put your arms out. Is that about this long? Plus a little bit. Okay, so you're going to start here. So this is 60 inches, which is how many feet? Math people? 5 feet. Okay, so the Mayflower was 25 feet. 25. Wow, seriously? 25 feet across. So what we're going to do, welcome Michaela, is Naomi and I are going to measure it. So 1, 2, now you go to the other side. 3, 4, and 5. Okay, stay right there. All right. So, okay. So this ship, all right, you can go back to the line. Thanks. This ship was basically from Michaela to me, that's how wide it is. Now, how long is it? It was around 100 feet long. So if all of you spread out to where your hands don't quite touch the next person, head that way. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so that would be about 50 feet. So imagine this wide and about that times 2. So if we went up to the bleachers, that would be how long this ship is. And it's like, oh, that's not so bad. Well, what if we put 130 people in this spot? So say something happened, there was a big storm, and everybody in the homeschool fellowship had to like hang out and camp out right here. And this was the only place we could stay. Between here and you and here and about 3 steps on the bleachers each side. No beds, no bunk beds, because it wasn't a passenger ship, it was a merchant ship, so it was made for stuff. So it'd be like camping out in the back of a semi-truck on a trip. So you had a little bit of space to yourself, your family, maybe like this much. Maybe this much if you had a big family. Yay. No privacy, no bathrooms, some animals, because we need to eat them. No way to clean up after the animals. No fresh water that you could use for anything other than drinking. The food got stale because they were on the ship a lot longer than they expected. It had cockroaches in it. This is not a pleasant, not a good time. So just imagine 130 people in this space. How long do you think that would be fun? Like, like if we were camping out. Ooh, it's an all-nighter at the youth group. Yay! Maybe a day, maybe 2 if you're having fun. I don't know. The 3 pregnant ladies, probably 2 minutes. So they're stuck. Now the thing is that the voyage wasn't supposed to take that long. So it's like, okay, we can live with this for 3 weeks until we get to the New World. We can make this happen. Religious freedom, yay, okay. Except the problem is it didn't work that way. They had 2 ships to start with, the Mayflower and the Steelwell. But the Steelwell got a leak, and it kept having so many problems. They're like, it's not going to make it. We can't do this. So then they're like, we got to dump more people on the Mayflower. Yay, that's fun. We love more people, sure. The more not so merry. So they've got all these people on here. Well, then they can't leave. So there's delays and delays. So they're stuck living on this boat for about a month or 2 before they even start, hoping that they'll be able to start because there's all these disagreements and yada, yada. So then finally it's like, yay, it's time to go. And then the ship got longer and longer, the whole trip, because these storms would come up. They got way off course. They're stuck sometimes. The main beam of the ship broke in the middle of the ocean. So now we're all going to die and sink, and that's the end of that. So much for American history. But It was the saints, which were later known as the Puritans, who actually fixed the ship, because they had this thing, they called it a screw, but it was basically like, it looked like it was about this big and maybe this big, and it had this kind of like steel screw thing that would go up, and they brought it to be able to help build their houses and raise them up. And so they were like, maybe that'll work. We don't have to turn around and go back after all of this. Can you imagine sailing for like a month, being sick as a dog, and they're like, oh, we got to go back. It'll take us a month to get back there. And you get right back where you started. I'd be like, throw me overboard. I'm just going to swim. So they brought this thing out and they used it, and it actually fixed the beam and it saved the ship. Well, eventually they get to land, but it's not the land where they were supposed to go because they're so far off course. They had what was called a patent from King James, and we got to talk about King James in a little bit. But a patent was basically permission to go and start a British colony in the New World. You had to have permission. Well, now they were in a new place, and they didn't have a patent to start a colony where they landed. So what are they supposed to do? Well, for one thing, you need to understand what the world looks like at this point for these people. And that's why I brought these. So I want all of you who have better knees than I do to come over here and pretend you're kindergartners, and we're going to gather around the book. See if you can see it. This is a map from the 1500s. It was an extremely priceless treasure that people would have fought and killed for. This is what the Spanish had. Now, if you look, you can see Africa, you can see Asia, and then you can see, well, South America, and then there's this weird nothingness. This was basically when anybody went on a trip, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and they found out stuff, they would come back and they would add to this map. But this, look at where America's supposed to be, in Canada. Nobody knows what's going on here because it was just unknown. See the end of South America? It's unknown too. Nobody knows how big this land is, how far it goes. It's just this totally brand new place. Like if you landed on an island and you're exploring it to try and figure out how big it is. So what do? Well, one thing you need to understand is about conquest at the time. Oh, hope you go grab my blue folder. It has the page numbers. Okay, so here's the Mayflower with just 70 of the people on it. So this is plus like 50 more people. And they weren't all what we think of as the pilgrims. They were all pilgrims because a pilgrimage is a journey somewhere, usually religious. But these guys, the reason that the saints, the Separatists, called themselves pilgrims was from that Bible verse about Abraham went someplace not knowing where he went because he recognized that they were pilgrims and strangers in the world. But you can see how crowded it is. I don't even want to think about it. I get motion sick in the car when we go around the corner. So it was crowded. It was disgusting. And a lot of people got sick. Thank you. Page 24. And they're getting to this place where they don't even understand what's going on. So the history up until now, this is 1620 that this is happening. Well, 1492 was when Columbus sailed the ocean blue, right? So something had to happen between 1492 and between now. And where did Columbus come from anyway? Spain. So what? So there's all this information here about slavery and when these kind of slaves went here and when these other people discovered slaves and when these people tried to do slaves and so then these people killed these people and This is an era of conquest. So if you were getting a woke education, you'd be hearing about the white people are the conquerors and they come from the British and they conquer everybody and yada, yada, yada. And that's all you hear about is the certain people that came to America and did American things. Well, let's go over here to this map. This is a map that actually does say what's in the world because, we figured things out. Okay, by the time that the Mayflower sails, which is like this right here, which doesn't look like that much unless you're in the boat and you're throwing up. So up until this point, the world powers right now, who would you say is a world power? Like what countries have a lot of power? China?
America.
Us, yeah. Russia. Okay, well at the time, it wasn't. It was Spain. Somebody find Spain for me. Good. And it was France. Good. And Britain, England. Good. And Portugal, which who even, yeah, who keeps track of Portugal? What in the world? Okay, so what was happening was people were sailing across trying to discover things, because if you discover things, you might find gold, you might find minerals, you might find all this kind of stuff. Well, Columbus, interesting dude that he was looking for a route here. So trying to go from Spain here, obviously you got to go woo. And since it was like, oh, the world is round, so what if we go this way? Because remember, they don't have any idea what's going on here. Like, we go this way and we'll get to India, and it'll be a shorter route, and then we get all the good stuff in India, the spices and the silks and the awesome stuff, and then we'll have more money and we'll have more power and our country will win. Yay! Okay, so that was the idea. That's why the Native Americans are called Indians. Because Columbus sails, la-di-da-di-da-di-da. Oh, look, I got to India. And look, there's brown people, like in India. These are Indians. Now, you'd think, once we figured out this wasn't India and these aren't Indians, somebody would have changed their name. But no, here we are, hundreds of years later, still confusing all the poor people in India by calling these people Indians. When I was in India, it was very confusing trying to figure out who you're talking about. So he really did believe he had landed in India, and these people were the Indians. Okay, so when the Mayflower comes, at this point, there are major world powers owning different parts. What's the language people speak in South America? Spanish. Why? Spain. Okay, this little dinky place comes over and starts taking over everywhere, and they start colonizing, and they start kicking people out, the people who lived there, because a lot of the Indians, we're going to call them that because the history books call them that. It's just easier. The native peoples were in small groups, and it's not like they had a whole country. It's not like they had a whole army, and they believed that land shouldn't belong to anybody. It belongs to everybody. So it got very confusing. These people think they sold them land for a few beads, and they're like, no, we just agreed to share it with you. And then suddenly they're like, we're building a house, putting a fence up, go away. So it's very confusing, and a lot of bad things happened in both sides, in both directions. We'll get to that later. But so the Spanish and the Portuguese come down here because Brazil speaks Portuguese. So this is pretty much all Spanish and Portuguese. Okay, well then we've got, what language do they speak in Canada? French, eh? So they speak English and French. So the French were coming over here, and they're like, we'll take this thing over here. And then the British were like, well, we want some too, you know? And so they're coming over here. Now, there's plenty of fighting going on. Florida belongs down here for a very long time. Texas, you know, remember the Alamo and all that. There's all kinds of fighting to conquer the land. It wasn't just these white people and these Indians. There's all this conquering back and forth and back and forth. And something you should know is that the Indians themselves, they don't think of themselves as Indians, because they're not. But also, they don't think of themselves as one group of people. It'd be like those white people, and they're like, well, I'm from this country and you're from this country. We don't even speak the same language. Like, not white people. That's what happened. They were all their own tribes and their own peoples. You've got the Cherokee, you've got the Huron, you've got all these, you know, the Cheyenne, all these different groups, and they were their own culture that was similar. But some of them were fighting against each other and conquering each other and taking over other lands. So it wasn't just these people are the conquerors and these people are the victims. Again, we've talked about that before, how that works. So the British are coming here. They don't actually know what's going on, but they start landing in these few tiny spots. And you will get to know in the next few weeks, when we get to like the Revolutionary War, and we think of America fighting for, you know, rights from the British, the whole of America was like right here. They didn't even know stuff existed out here for a very long time. So you got to change your brain from thinking, oh, America means this. Well, it didn't. For the Mayflower people, America was like, think. Like less than my finger, like a little tiny dot. That's all they knew. That's all they had. So why was it worth doing this? I mean, literally, if the only things that they'd heard about people coming there was that you're going to get slaughtered and maybe scalped, and people had come before to Jamestown, and over a period of 3 years, 3,600 people came to Jamestown, to that colony, and 3,000 of them died. So this was not a great idea like, ooh, that'll be fun. Let's go have an adventure. We'll write a book about it. Ha! Okay, so why is it worth it? What's going on? Let's go back and find out. So let's find out. William Brewster. Is anybody William Brewster? Rachel. William Brewster was a free man. He was a saint. Congrats. Traveled with his wife and sons, Jonathan, love, and wrestling. Now, if I was a boy, I'd much rather be named Wrestling than Love, but you know. And daughters, Patience and Fear. And 2 kids as indentured servants. Poor kids. Richard Moore. He might be one of those missing. Richard Moore was one of the indentured servants. He was a kid, and he and his 3 siblings got turned over from their father to other people on the Mayflower as indentured servants. Now, an indentured servant is different than a slave and different than a regular servant. So a slave is somebody that usually got stolen and kidnapped, and you have no rights at all, and we're just going to treat you however we want for the rest of your life, and there's no way to get free. A servant is usually a person who's, you know, serving, but they might get paid for it a little bit. An indentured servant is somewhere in between the two. It's basically where you say, I want to go to America. I will serve you for 7 years. And like, you know, Jacob and Laban, I will serve you for 7 years for the passage to go to America. So people gave away 7 years of their lives to get on that ship and throw up for 60 days. But what that meant was you were somebody else's kind of slave. They didn't have to pay you. You had to do whatever they wanted for 7 years, and then you got to go free. A lot of people, like lots and lots and lots of people, indentured themselves out for the opportunity to go to the New World. Why in the world? Well, we'll get to that. So this dude, he and his siblings got indentured out by their dad. Why? Weird scandal. The mom got accused of being inappropriate, and so the dad gave the kids away. Something about he wanted them to grow up with a better example or something. But personally, I'm like, you just made me a servant for 7 years. I'd rather stick with the scandal. You know what I'm saying? Okay, John Carver. Anybody John Carver? John Carver, what happened to you? He was a free man. He helped negotiate the expedition. He would be the first governor, but he'd die in a year. Sorry. Mary Chilton. Her parents would die the first winter, but she survived. And if all your family dies and you're in this little place in this little village, you got to start shuffling people around here and there and whatever. Well, you need to eat and you'd like to not die, so you might go and be an indentured servant to some other family so that you have a place to stay. Wow. Fun times. William Button, something like that. Okay? He's the servant of Samuel Fuller. You are the only one to die on the voyage. Sorry about that. Except for that crew member. Okay. John Goodman. He came over alone. He got lost in the woods while he was trying to gather thatch for a roof, and he eventually found his way back, but he got frostbite. Sorry. Peregrine White. You're the first baby born on the Mayflower. The dad would die first winter, and the mom would marry one of the other guys whose wife would die the first winter. So again, shuffling around, but you're a baby, so you don't care. Okay, John Billington. Who's John Billington? Okay, he's a stranger, which means you are not a Puritan. Came with his wife and 2 sons. They caused problems. He was hanged for murder. Sorry about that. And his wife was whipped and put in the stocks for slander. You know what the stocks are? Have you ever seen those? It's the wooden thing with the holes in it, and they have to stick their head through and their arms through, and people throw tomatoes at them and stuff, except they didn't have any tomatoes in the New World, and they were starving, so they probably threw, I don't know, dirt. Okay, and their kids also caused problems. Francis Billington. We're not talking about that. You're going to tell us about him in a minute. Richard Clark. He was a stranger. Nobody knows anything about him but his name. What a mystery that you will never find out about. Francis Eaton. Stranger, was a carpenter who is probably the reason the ship got saved because you knew how to fix it. Good job. Traveled with his wife, daughter Priscilla, a son, and a servant. Anybody Priscilla? Priscilla Mullins. All right. Priscilla Mullins was a stranger. The only one in her family who survived the winter. So I guess that means you died. Sorry. Later married John Alden and became a prominent member of the community. Miles Standish. He was a stranger. He was the military advisor. He's the one who helped build a fort. He's like, let's defend ourselves. So there was a little bit of a conflict there. But he also helped care for the sick over the winter, the first winter, when his wife died. Richard Warren. He was a stranger. He came alone and left his wife behind, but not because he didn't like her, probably because they didn't have money. When she joined him later, they had 7 kids, and their descendants include people including Ulysses S. Grant and Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Wow. Did I miss anybody? Moses Fletcher. Oh, Moses Fletcher traveled alone and died the first winter. That's all we got. So, Will, you found out about somebody. Tell us about him.
Do you want them just to read it? Or?
Sure, you can read it or you can just tell us.
Bradford was born in 1590 in Austerfield, Yorkshire, emerged as a central figure among the English separatists who sought religious freedom in the early 17th century. After years of refuge in the Netherlands, he sailed aboard the Mayflower in 1620 and helped to establish Plymouth Colony, the first lasting English settlement.
Awesome. I will take that paper so I can give you points for it. Fantastic. You're actually saying some of my PowerPoint. Thank you very much. You want to teach? All right. Hope, you're the other person who had something? Heck, why don't you come on all the way up so that the camera can hear what you have to say? Because you guys need to hear about this Francis kid. He's turned into a family joke already. Francis!
So Francis was 14 when his family boarded the Mayflower. His father was one of the signers of the Mayflower Compact, and while the Mayflower was anchored off Cape Cod in December of 1620, Francis shot a gun near a barrel of gunpowder, which caused a fire that could have caused extreme damage had it not been put out quickly. Around January of 1621, Francis climbed a tree about 3 miles from the colony and reported that he had discovered a great sea, but it turned out to be a large pond that is still known as Billington Sea. After his older brother, died around 1627 and his father's execution for murder in 1630, he married Christian Penn Billington, who was the widow of Francis. One of you guys was another Francis Eaton. In 1634, they had 9 children, 7 of whom lived normal lives. One, we don't know their name, but they died young. And then another one, Rebecca, we know she was born, and that's it.
Wow. So it sounds like Francis straightened up a little bit. Thank you. But what a way to be known throughout entire history was you were the twerp little kid who almost blew up the Mayflower, and that's why we have no American history, because of Francis. Or that when you got there, you were doing stupid things. His brother wandered off and ended up with the Native Americans, and they thought he was lost and maybe kidnapped and all that stuff. They caused problems. So like when you're like, ooh, everybody who came on the Mayflower was so sweet and wonderful. We had some dysfunctional families, you know what I'm saying? And then some got dysfunctional when, they died. Okay, now let's back up a little bit. Why in the world are people willing to do this? Okay, that little dinky ship that's only made for stuff, not for people. Why are we willing to indenture ourselves or risk our lives, do all these things to go? Okay, so we are going to ignore for the moment the merchants and the gold diggers and the people who were the strangers on the ship. Because when we're studying America's Christian heritage, there are plenty of people who are not part of the Christian heritage. We're having a perspective, not a bias, a perspective. We're focusing on these people, and I'll explain why. These people, in my opinion, don't really matter for American history, except that they might have caused problems. But why are these people considered such an important part of history, especially when there were already people who had come over? So, why are these people considered the beginning of America? This is confusing. No, it's not. Well, it's complicated, but it won't be by the end of this. So let's find out. Okay, something you need to know. I borrowed this from a nice teacher guy on YouTube. Hope he doesn't mind, because it was really, really good. So we need to explain about the Christian presence on the Mayflower, and what does this mean? So you have Christians in general, which include a lot of different people who believe a lot of different things, and some people who call themselves Christians who probably aren't, like the corrupt Roman Catholic Church that we talked about last week. Okay, so at this point, the Catholic Church is not in charge, because you remember Henry VIII made himself head of the Church of England. Thank you very much. It's like, who wants the head of the church to be that guy? Make him mad he cuts off your head. This is not a good idea. But that continued on. And when they finally got the Bible in English, which was which kind of Bible? Geneva Bible. Yes, 1599. The medieval Bible, they're starting to read the Bible for themselves. They're learning all these things, and they're looking at it like a genuine book for life. It's not just, oh, this will be a nice thing to read. It was like, this is God's word. Tell us exactly how to live. Can you imagine reading the 10 Commandments for the first time, reading Jesus's words for the first time, reading that all this pomp and nonsense and how you have to be rich for God to like you is exactly what Jesus talked against? Be so cool. So they're reading on the Mayflower when they're not throwing up, and they're like getting rules and laws for their future. That was the whole idea. So you had the Puritans, which was a big group still in England. They wanted to purify the church. So they didn't want to like get rid of the Church of England, kind of like Martin Luther. He wanted to purify the Roman Catholic Church, and then they tried to kill him. So he's like, okay, I'll go start my own thing. And that's what the Separatists did. They were like, this purifying thing isn't going to work. They're going to cut off our heads. And they did do that for some of them and put them on spikes around town to warn people, don't mess with us. Ew, okay. So they're not nice people. They threatened to send them as slaves to the West Indies or to Jamaica, actually. And so you got the Separatists. They're like, we're going to go start our own thing. Well, that's a problem. Now at this point, 1605, 1620, around this era, the king in charge is a guy named James. We are all very familiar with King James because a lot of us have his Bible. It's not his Bible. It's not like he read it, and it's not like he obeyed it, but he did commission it. And again, we have a very ungodly king making a Bible version for an ungodly reason, but God can use anybody. God uses a donkey. He used Henry VIII. He can use King James too. Well, King James doesn't like the Separatists because he's in charge of the Church of England, right? And now they want to go make another church. Well, if they make another church, that means he's not in charge. So he starts threatening them, etc. And they're like, we have to leave or we're all going to die. So they do. And they leave, and that's the Pilgrims. We have to go on a journey someplace else so we can live in peace if we survive the journey there. Okay. Our word for today. Last week, what was our word that we studied? Anybody remember? Yeah. Bias. Very good. There's a difference between bias and perspective. Remember, bias is when you manipulate the facts to go with a certain thing you want people to believe. There's nobody in this room. See? I told you nobody would come to my class. Losers. That's bias. I can honestly say I don't see anybody, but I know you're there. And it would be wrong to do that. People use bias all the time. Just get on the news. You see it. It's everywhere. Okay. Perspective is when you are looking at a certain direction on purpose to see something. We are looking at the Christian heritage of our nation. So we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the merchants and what they did and didn't do in Francis and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So this week we want to talk about rights. Why? I'm going to turn this so that Grace can see the slides. Hope you feel better soon, Grace. Okay, rights. What does that mean? Who has rights? Well, pretty much nobody back then, unless you had a lot of money and a lot of power. Hopi, can you come up and try and set this up again for me? Oh, look, it works. You fixed it. Thanks. All right. Here's the way the world was working then, and it explains a lot of why the people on the Mayflower were willing to do what they did, and why thousands upon thousands of people were willing to follow them. So, the rights of that time. First, you started with that dude right there, Mr. James, the divine right of kings. Dun, da, da, da. Somebody play some trumpets. He believed, and a lot of the kings in that era for a very long time believed, okay, the king's the head of the church, right? Divine right of kings means if I was born a king, I was chosen by God, and therefore I can do no wrong. As in, I can do whatever I want. I am above the law. I'm above the Bible. I am God's chosen, and therefore don't tell me what to do. Kind of like you're not the boss of me. And so they put themselves up. A lot of them were very, very wicked people. But they were like, I got the divine right of kings. Ha 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 ha, you can't mess with me. So that was a problem. Now, this is not a good thing. It's definitely not biblical. What's next in power? Then you have the nobility. So your lords and your ladies and your dukes and your earls and all these people with titles who are like, we're so awesome. Yay for us. Okay. They also believed they were higher, just literally higher in worth and higher in status, so they could treat people below them as lower. Next, you have the gentry. So look at these nice little fancy pants kids, like literally in fancy pants. That came from somewhere. So they are rich. They don't have titles, but they have money. And if you've ever seen Jane Austen movies, you understand about the whole title, money, and which is more important. And so the people with money want to marry with people with titles and yada, yada, yada. Because this is power. You have rights if you have money, or you have rights if you have a title. You have more worth, supposedly. Well, then you move on. What about us lowly people? No such thing as middle class. Didn't exist. Well, next you have the church. The Church of England sounds good. It's like, well, hey, we're not with the corrupt Roman Catholic Church, so that's better, right? Well, this was the Church of England. Doesn't really look that much different. The hat looks different, but still a big old obnoxious hat. They're still doing the pomp and the like all this Pharisaical type stuff. So you can see why the Puritans were like, no, this is not in the Bible. We're not supposed to have churches that cost so much that all the peasants are starving so we can pay for them. This is not good. So the Puritans separate from that. Okay, then you go down to the peasants. Farther down, there's other little layers. The peasants were like scum, and most of us would have been peasants. Sorry about that. Let me just read you some of the things I found out. The peasants lived in difficult times, back-breaking work, dawn to dusk, high rates of child mortality, extreme poverty. They lived in small, dark cottages, often sharing space with livestock. Yay, my favorite pig. He's sleeping right here. Okay. Eating bread, pottage, and limited vegetables. So you see what's missing. Meat, dairy, things that will make you strong. Life was centered on farming strips of land, with summer work beginning as early as 3 a.m. The peasants worked for a local lord. So you got a lord, some noble person who has power and whatever. And gentlemen, gentle, you get the like gentle as in you don't do work. That was the idea. You were more valuable in life if you didn't actually do anything. We think that's stupid because we're Americans, and we'll get to why Americans think that's stupid. But here's the gentleman. He gets all dressed up. He stands around. If you've ever watched a Jane Austen movie, which I love, by the way, but once I started thinking about it, I'm like, these poor girls, they get super dressed up every single day, and then they sit and do needlework. They're not allowed to do stuff because they're supposed to be gentlewomen. This is me. Look at me. I'm like a vase sitting on your table, lovely and beautiful and somewhat stupid, but that's all right. Unless you are, an accomplished woman. She has knowledge of all the known languages, and she's a snob, but she's very pretty and all that stuff. She can play the piano. Yay. If there's a crisis, she can't help you at all. And if you need food, she can't cook either, but she can embroider a tablecloth. Woo! Yay. Okay. So the poor peasants at the bottom, they're just like, meh. Kind of like slaves, basically, because they have no rights, they have no power. If the Lord wants to come in and say, you have to give me everything this week, and they're like, we're going to starve, and they're like, I don't care. That's it. So that's the kind of culture we're coming from. Why does this matter? Well, it kind of explains why a lot of people were willing to make themselves servants for a long time for the idea of being their own master. So if you'd lived your whole life under me, some gentle woman who never does anything, but I'm like, do the stuff, do the stuff, do the stuff, and you're starving and you've been mistreated, and somebody's like, hey, we're going to go to the new world. We might die, but if we don't die, we're going to create a whole new culture, and you get to be your own master and have your own home and like farm your own stuff and make your own choices. I'd be in, except for that ship thing that I'd be throwing up so much. Okay. This I want to show you. So what does this have to do with America's Christian heritage? For the Pilgrims in particular. So they're in the middle of the sea. The thing is taking way longer than it should. They're in danger. There's this horrible storm that comes up. Well, the Pilgrims reading for that day was September 22nd. And their Bible reading for the day. Remember, these people haven't had the English Bible for very long. So this might be the first time you've ever heard this psalm. Because it's not like they each had their own copy either. It was a precious thing. It was probably the leaders that had one and was reading to everybody else. So we get together that day. Everybody's sick, miserable. You haven't had enough to eat. You're starting to show signs of vitamin deficiencies, all that stuff. But they're like, okay, we're going to read the Bible. Okay. This is the Geneva version, which is very similar to King James. This is what they read that day. Psalm 107. For he commandeth and raiseth the stormy wind, and it lifteth up the waves thereof. And they're like, They mount up to heaven and descend to the deep, so that their soul melteth for trouble. They are tossed to and fro and stagger like a drunken man, and all their cunning is gone. So, yeah, we get it, but then what? Then they cry unto the Lord in their trouble, and he bringeth them out of their distresses. He turneth the storm to calm, so that the waves thereof are still. When they are quieted, they are glad. And he bringeth them unto the haven where they would be, unto their desired end and destination. Let them therefore confess before the Lord his loving kindness and his wonderful works to the children of men. They knew God was with them. They kept the faith. They believed. They hung on. God is helping us. And one of the reasons that they were so sure was a guy named William Bradford. Now, you might be wondering, why the Geneva Bible instead of the King James Bible? Okay, I'm just going to give you a little history of that so that you understand. What year was King James Bible? Anybody? Ooh, the authorized King James Version of the Bible, 1611. Some people still say we do the 1611, which is really not true because spelling has changed and English has changed, but that's okay. We'll skip that part. King James didn't like the Geneva Bible because remember we talked about the Geneva Bible had all those notes in it and commentary, and a lot of the commentary was anti-divine right of kings because it's not biblical, and he'd had these things in it that were like, maybe you should be a pilgrim, you know. And he was like, no, I don't like this. So he commissioned a translation of the Bible that didn't have all these extra notes, and the Geneva Bible also had some stuff in it that it shouldn't have. It was kind of like, ooh, here's an extra resource that might be, some people consider it's the Bible and some people don't, that sort of thing. So like, I wouldn't want a Geneva Bible today, but King James was like, we're going to make it like this, and we're going to make it more in favor of, you know, honor the king, obey the laws, that sort of thing, so that he wasn't having trouble with people. That was the idea. Now, he got together a good team of translators, and the system that whoever came up with, probably not James himself, he was busy not taking a bath. He didn't like to take baths. That's gross. So anyway, people are translating the Bible. I don't think he ever read it, but he commissioned it. Well, you've got these people. King James wants to kill them. Do they really want a Bible with his name on it? So throughout the beginning of American culture, the King James Bible wasn't as popular because we were very anti-king. We were rights of the people, not the rights of the monarchy. And so the fact that his name was big on there was a problem. So that's an interesting piece. You can study the history of why it switched from the one to the other. But that's why in the rotunda of the Capitol, they've got their Bible, and it's the Geneva Bible that they're learning from. A little bit of history. Wait, William Tyndale, come back. Okay, Bradford. William Bradford. He's this important guy. He's on the Mayflower. He was an orphan. He joined the Separatists. He went to Holland with them, and now he's on the boat. John Carver is going to be the first governor, but he's going to die the first year. Then they elect this guy. They elected a new governor every single year. He got elected 30 times in a row, which tells you something good about this guy. He was something else. Well, he wrote a journal about the journey. Journey. Don't know if you ever thought about that. And it was like a diary, but it wasn't like, oh, I've got a crush on so-and-so kind of a diary. It was a journal of what happened. It was a journal of what happened to keep the record for future generations. And we see that that is important because the longer the time goes by, people get a bias and they start to either like the Holocaust never happened kind of thing, or they're just twisting things, or they're saying it's different. So he kept track of things, and extensive. It's a book that they call Of Plymouth Plantation. If you see it ever, you will notice it's spelled differently, Plymouth, P-L-I. It's because there weren't any spelling standards until Noah Webster, who was about 100 years later, and so people spelled it different ways. Okay, he wrote this Plymouth Plantation. It got lost for 100 years. Can you imagine writing a historical document and then they're like, your grandkids, you should read this. And they're like, what, where, what? They found it in England for some reason. I don't know how it got there, but then it became part of history. And we know about the Mayflower more than just about anything else because of him. Good job, guy. Okay. But this guy, what a strong believer. I'm just going to read some of the stuff that was in his extensive writing. The Pilgrims shook off this yoke of anti-Christian bondage, so the issue with the Church of England, and as the Lord's free people joined themselves by a covenant of the Lord into a church estate in the fellowship of the gospel, to walk in all his ways made known, or to be made known. So all the things we've learned from the Bible so far, and all the things we're going to learn, we're going to make a culture based on that. According to their best endeavors, whatever it should cost them. Wow. And there's more I want to tell you, but we're going to do that next week because we need these last 10 minutes for books. Okay. So the Puritans came for good reasons, Bible reasons. That's good. All right. Now, you all have a binder, each one of you. And as your paper with your name in the front, the intention of that is so it is hard to lose. If you bring it, you get points. So every week, I want to see your binder. The binder, and you get points if your pen stays in it. Because for some reason, having a pen every week is like the hardest thing in the world. So, your pen, your binder. The little doohickey thing inside, the little pocket, The calendar is unimportant. It just came with the pocket when I bought it. So you can do whatever you want to with the calendar. Write down your assignments. That'd be fun. But that is going to be to hold the book that's going to be easiest to lose. Everybody's going to get one of these next week. The New England Primer 1777 version that I told you about that kids learn to read from. Super cool. So everybody's going to get one of these, and you're going to keep it in that little pocket so it always stays with you like a friend. Okay. The other one that just about everybody's going to get is this one. I told you about it. 100 Verses That Made America. Exceptionally good book. You can read it like one a day with your whole family. Super cool stories. I was going to give every single person one of these, but those of you who have siblings, if you'd like, you can choose that you get one of these and you get one of the other things. So that's my plan. But if you want both of you to have one of these copies so you can keep it forever and ever, let me know. But otherwise, the other books, everybody in this room gets to choose. Now, if you have siblings, you're going to get this as your second book. Signers of the Constitution. Wow. I enjoyed this book so much. It's like chock full of highlights and has super cool stories in it about bombings and the war and really cool things. So it's every single person who signed the Declaration of Independence. It's a little tiny biography about them. It is from 1848. So people still remembered. It wasn't like last year and somebody just made up a bunch of stuff. This is genuinely historical, and from what I understand, kids in school used to learn this and read this book for hundreds of years before our system changed. This is a great book. All right, everybody gets to choose their third book, and that's what we're going to do today before you leave. What are your options? This is one. Recommend it. Wives of the Signers of the Declaration of Independence. Got to admit, it's not as interesting because it's not done until 1912, and the women didn't write as extensively. They were busy, you know, like having kids and things like that. So it doesn't get as deep, but there's some really good stories on here. Okay. Rediscovering God in America. This one's by Newt Gingrich. It's a modern book, but the reason I liked it, it's color and it has pictures, but it's all these like places in the Capitol that have scripture and that have stories about the Bible and where all the carvings are all over the Capitol. There's Bible verses all over the Capitol. It's really cool. So that's another one. Or if you are younger and you'd rather just have a story, The Mayflower Secret. So this is the story of the Mayflower from the perspective of one of the girls, and it's just interesting. Okay. So your job is to decide which one you want, and you got to decide today so I can order them. And that's what this is for. So I'm going to leave these up here. You can come and look through them, figure out which one you want, and then you're going to tell me your market. And the other thing you can do is on your binder, the front has your name really big, and so that'll be easy to find, but the back is just a plain white binder. So I have stickers up here, and you can pick 2 stickers to put on the back of your binder as another way just to keep from losing it. And for fun. Okay, any questions about all of that? Okay, your challenge this week is not to research anything. Your challenge is to write me a story about you, a fictional story, as if you were the one on the Mayflower. Are you a saint? Are you a stranger? Are you a kid? Are you an adult? Are you an indentured servant? Or are you somebody really powerful? What are you thinking about the ship? What do you think about the other people on the ship? What do you think about the new world and the savages supposedly that are out there that you don't know what's going to happen? It can be as short or as long as you'd like. Just give me a good story. Tell me what happens. As if you were writing a journal like William Bradford, but from a more personal perspective. Now, again, I will say it again. No homework is required in this class. We're not doing tests or required homework. If you do this challenge, you get points. And next week, I'll bring some of the prizes that we're going to be giving out. And you can be like, ooh, I like that. I want the points. Okay? So that's it for this week. You can come up and look through the books. You can come up and get your stickers. And I will send an email out today with a bunch of little videos where you can learn more stuff.